They were never your friend. Carl Jung's dark truth about human connection. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. Carl Jung. Welcome to Spiritual Wisdom. In this video, we're going to explore one of Carl Jung's most unsettling insights, the hidden truth behind human connection and why some people you once called a friend may never have been one at all. What if the warm smiles and kind words you've trusted were actually masks? What if genuine friendship is far rarer than we think? Not because others are always bad, but because most of us haven't even met our true selves. Jung's discovery of the persona reveals how we all wear psychological masks to fit in, often hiding unconscious motives, not just from others, but from ourselves. Before we dive in, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt betrayed by someone you once trusted completely? Do you think we ever truly know someone? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Let's begin this powerful journey into the shadowy side of friendship, self-awareness, and spiritual growth. 1. The persona, the mask that blocks real connection. We live in a world where connections are everywhere. Social media, friends, workplace acquaintances, neighbors we nod to, but very few of these are real. In fact, most of the time, the people around you aren't related to you at all. They're interacting with the mask you wear, and you're doing the same to them. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, and understanding it is not just psychological, it's spiritual. Because real connection only begins when the mask falls away. And until that moment, the loneliness you feel in a room full of people is not an illusion. It's a spiritual awakening, a signal that your soul is craving authenticity in a world addicted to performance. The persona, according to Jung, is not evil. It's necessary for navigating society. But the danger arises when we forget it's a mask. Men, especially in the 30 to 65 age range, often wear their personas like armor. The strong provider at work, the agreeable husband at home, the stoic friend who never complains. We are taught early on that vulnerability equals weakness, so we hide our fear, our pain, our dreams, and even our joy behind socially acceptable faces. Over time, these masks harden into our identities. We start believing the act we're putting on. And worse, others do too. So instead of bonding from soul to soul, we bond mask to mask, role to role. We don't form friendships, we form rehearsals. The people we think we're close to often have no idea who we truly are beneath the surface. This creates a deep spiritual fracture that modern life only amplifies. In a culture obsessed with appearances, hustle, and control, the invitation to drop the mask feels risky. But the truth is, real connection cannot happen without risk. It demands exposure, vulnerability, and honesty. It demands that we stop performing and start being. Yet most relationships never reach that level, because most people aren't ready to meet you without their mask on. This is why betrayal cuts so deep. It isn't just the loss of a person, it's the collapse of a carefully curated illusion. And when someone walks away, you're often not losing a friend. You're losing a mirror that only reflects your persona, not your essence. As Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But that journey is lonely, because not everyone will walk with you once you start removing your disguise. But that loneliness is not your enemy. It is the path. It is the spiritual fire. It burns away the false so that your soul can rise to the truth. So how do you live this truth in modern life? First, stop confusing attention with intimacy. Just because someone speaks to you every day does not mean they see you. Second, observe when you change who you are, depending on your environment. That is when your personality takes over. Third, find spaces where you can speak from your soul without fear of rejection. This is where spiritual friendships flourish. And finally, understand that not everyone is capable of meeting you where you are. Some people are just born to know the mask, and that is okay. You are not a failure. You have evolved. In this spiritual awakening, you learn that you are not here to fit in. You are here to be seen. And those who are meant for you will never ask you to be anything other than who you truly are. So take the risk. Take off the mask. And in doing so, invite connection that is not only authentic, but sacred. Comment below, "I am awakened." 2. The shadow, the denied self that sabotages relationships. They say real friendship is built on authenticity. But have you ever wondered why some connections just feel off? Like no matter how much you give, something's missing. Carl Jung believed that many relationships crumble not because of what's said, but because of what's hidden. He called it the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny, bury, and refuse to own. These are not just the ugly emotions like anger, envy, or insecurity, but also the radiant qualities we're secretly ashamed of, like our drive, confidence, or deep sense of self-worth. In the name of politeness or spiritual performance, people push these parts down to protect their image. But what Jung warned us about is this: whatever you reject in yourself doesn't disappear, it gets projected. So when someone can't admit they're jealous, they accuse you of arrogance. When they can't face their own neediness, they call you too much. And in this toxic projection loop, authentic connection dies. You're not building a friendship. You're becoming a mirror for someone else's unresolved wounds. This happens all the time, especially in modern friendships, where branding your identity is often more important than being real. Think about social media. People curate every moment, filtering their lives until there's no shadow left, only light. But you can't form a soul-level connection when all you're allowed to see is someone's highlight reel. In the name of positivity and fake harmony, people avoid conflict, dodge honesty, and smile through betrayal. But can there be real trust without truth? Can there be a deep connection without showing the broken, vulnerable parts too? You may have had friendships where you felt you couldn't show your pain or your power because it would make others uncomfortable. That's not spiritual growth. That's a spiritual performance. I knew someone who always seemed kind and spiritual on the surface, always posting quotes about love and light. But whenever I achieved something, they would go silent. No congratulations, no support. And when I opened up about challenges, they'd redirect the conversation or make it about them. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I was too intense, too emotional. But later, I realized it wasn't me. They were at war with their own shadow. My confidence triggered their insecurity. My vulnerability exposed their emotional avoidance. That's when I understood. Not everyone in your circle is your friend. Some people only connect with your wounds, not your wholeness. So ask yourself, who are the people in your life that can handle both your pain and your power? Who celebrates your growth without envy? Who stays when you're messy, not just when you're shining? Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." True spirituality is not about pretending to be above human emotion. It's about integrating it. And spiritual growth begins when we stop projecting and start owning. So the next time a friendship feels off, ask, is this person really seeing me? Or are they just seeing their shadow? The message is simple but powerful. True friendship begins where the mask ends. To grow spiritually, you must be brave enough to see your own darkness and gentle enough to make room for the darkness of others. Are you willing to do that? Are they willing? Because if they aren't, they will never be your friends. If you are, comment below, "I am willing." 3. Projection. Why we don't see others clearly. When you think someone is your friend, are they truly showing up for who you are or who they need you to be? This is one of the most confronting questions Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom asks us to sit with. At the heart of his teachings lies the shadowy mechanism of projection, and it's likely been quietly shaping your relationships more than you realize. Jung believed that much of what we call connection is actually a mirror of our own unconscious mind. That means the friend you adored may have simply been reflecting back a part of you that needed healing, validation, or love. And when that illusion cracks, we don't just feel let down, we feel betrayed. Why? Because we weren't really relating to them. We were relating to an image we created in our own mind, built from our unmet needs, unresolved wounds, and disowned traits. Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Isn't that what we often do in relationships? We call it fate when someone enters our life and makes us feel seen. But were they seeing us, or were we just seeing ourselves in them? This is the painful truth many avoid. Projection is one of the most powerful, yet invisible forces in human connection. You project your longing for emotional safety, belonging, or parental love onto someone, and suddenly they seem like the perfect friend or partner. But it's not them you're loving. It's the comfort of what they represent. This is why relationships built on projection often start with obsession and end in disillusionment. One day, they do something that shatters the fantasy. Maybe they didn't text back fast enough. Maybe they failed to meet an expectation you never voiced, and suddenly the illusion falls apart. You're not just disappointed, you're devastated. Not because they betrayed you, but because the emotional mirror you clung to no longer reflects what you need it to. Have you ever wondered why some people trigger extreme emotions in you while others feel neutral? That's often projection at work. Either they carry a shadow you haven't integrated, or they awaken a need you've buried. Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom teaches us that the more unaware we are of our own inner landscape, the more we use others as emotional canvases. Instead of truly seeing people for who they are, we unknowingly reduce them to roles in our own psychic drama: caretaker, betrayer, savior, enemy. So what happens when we stop projecting? We start connecting. When you reclaim the parts of yourself, you've exiled your anger, your fear, your tenderness. You no longer need someone else to hold them for you. This is where authentic friendship begins. It's not built on neediness, but on presence. It's not about finding someone to complete you, but being whole enough to meet another soul as they are. Can you look at the people in your life right now and say with honesty, "I see them clearly"? Or are you still chasing ghosts of your childhood, shadows of your past, or echoes of your pain? The invitation here is not to blame others for failing to be who we wanted them to be, but to awaken to the truth of how we distort connection to avoid facing ourselves. Spiritual wisdom isn't always soft. It often demands brutal honesty with our own illusions. So, what do you do with this awareness? You pause before you idealize someone. You ask yourself, what part of me am I seeing in them? You embrace solitude not as loneliness, but as a sacred space for integration. Because only when we stop demanding others carry the weight of our unconsciousness can we start forming relationships rooted in truth, not fantasy. And that's the spiritual awakening Jung pointed us toward, not a life free of pain, but a life rich with self-awareness, depth, and genuine human connection. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. Your journey to stoic self-mastery and victory continues with each lesson. 4. The collective, unconscious, archetypes that control us. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. But what if none of those people truly know you at all? In the world of modern connection, Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious is not just theory. It's a lens through which we begin to see the hidden scripts that run our friendships, partnerships, and even our sense of self. According to Jung, beneath the surface of our conscious interactions lies a vast reservoir of shared symbols, images, and roles that we unknowingly inherit, what he called archetypes. These archetypes shape us long before we realize it. We don't just make friends. We often cast people into roles without even knowing it. The hero who will save us, the caregiver who will soothe us, the victim who will make us feel needed, or the trickster who brings chaos. These roles are not chosen from the heart. They are inherited patterns acting through us, subtly dictating how we relate. And here's the dark truth. Most friendships are not formed on the basis of seeing one another as whole, evolving, spiritual beings. They're formed because someone fits neatly into a familiar psychological role that confirms our unconscious expectations. Jung warned that this kind of connection creates conformity, not authenticity. You may think you're being accepted, but you're being assigned. This isn't friendship, it's projection. So many men live out these archetypal friendships for decades, mistaking loyalty for real connection and camaraderie for truth, only to wake up in midlife with a gnawing emptiness they can't explain. This awakening, while painful, can become the beginning of something powerful, a spiritual awakening that calls you to look beyond the mask you wear and the roles you cast others in. So what does this mean in modern life? It means that when a friend disappoints you, it might not be betrayal. It might be the collapse of an illusion. It means that when you feel unseen or misunderstood, you're likely not even relating to them from your real self, nor are they. The spiritual path demands that we break these archetypal chains and begin to see people not as roles, but as reflections of their own inner journeys. It's no longer enough to be the hero in someone's story or the stoic in your own. It's time to ask, who am I outside of the roles I've always played? And who are the people around me when I stop assigning them scripts? Carl Jung once said, "Until you become conscious of your unconscious, it will guide your life and you will call it destiny." True friendship begins where projection ends. It begins when you dare to meet a person not as a symbol, but as a soul. As you begin to decipher these psychological patterns, look not just outward, but inward. Reflect on the friendships you have today. Are they spiritual anchors or unconscious echoes of the past? On your journey of spiritual awakening, be mindful of who you allow into your sacred space. Not everyone deserves a seat at the table of who you are. Only those who see you, not the role you play, are worthy of walking beside you. Comment below. I choose the right person. 5. Mutual deception. Why intimacy is so rare. Most people walk through life wearing masks, not the physical kind, but emotional and psychological ones crafted from childhood conditioning, social expectations, and a fear of rejection. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But that journey is rarely welcomed in the relationships we think are closest to us. In fact, one of the darkest truths Jung highlighted about human connection is that many of our so-called friendships are built not on truth, but on mutual deception. Two people meet, each unconsciously offering up a carefully curated version of themselves, the successful one, the funny one, the agreeable one, and in return, they expect the same. It's an unspoken agreement. I won't show you my shadows if you don't show me yours. The tragedy is that when one person finally dares to be real, revealing a flaw, a fear, a wound, the entire dynamic becomes threatened. The relationship becomes unstable, not because of dishonesty, but because of truth. And that's when many people pull away, disappear, or emotionally shut down. Let me share a story. A man I once knew had a best friend for nearly 15 years. They shared everything: drinks after work, family holidays, even deep conversations about goals and ambitions. But one day, during a particularly hard period, he confided in this friend about a bout of depression, the kind that makes it hard to get out of bed. Instead of support, his friend grew distant. Calls went unanswered. Invitations stopped coming. Eventually, they drifted apart. It wasn't because the friendship wasn't real. It was because the mask had come off. And once authenticity entered the room, the illusion of closeness vanished. The connection they had was based on mutual performance, not spiritual truth. So here's the real question. How many people in your life know the real you? Not the smiling version, not the competent version, but the one who struggles, who questions, who grows. And are you willing to accept that some of the people you consider close may not have the capacity or desire to meet you at that level of truth? The reason intimacy is so rare is because it requires both people to be spiritually awake. It asks for vulnerability, for the kind of honesty that goes deeper than words. Real spiritual growth doesn't just happen in solitude. It happens when we show up unmasked and allow others to do the same. But this kind of authenticity is risky, and many fear that being known will lead to being abandoned. So they retreat, and relationships remain shallow, even after decades. What would happen if we stopped performing? If we stopped trying to be what others expected and simply allowed ourselves to be? What kind of world could we create if we valued truth over appearances? Here's the lesson. Spiritual growth demands we confront the masks we wear not just in public, but in our most intimate spaces. If you're on a path of true spirituality, you will inevitably outgrow relationships built on illusion. You may lose people. You may find yourself standing alone. But what you'll gain in return is priceless real connection. emotional freedom, and the rare, sacred experience of being seen as you truly are. So I'll leave you with this. Who are you beneath the mask? And are you brave enough to let someone see? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how this has shaped your journey. 6. Psychological addiction to persona and approval. Many people don't realize they're not addicted to people. They're addicted to approval. You see, when Carl Jung spoke of the persona, he wasn't talking about a mask you wear just to trick others. He was talking about the psychological costume you put on every day to survive at work, in social settings, even in relationships. Over time, the approval you receive from others for wearing that mask becomes addictive. It's not just about being liked. It's about being validated for a version of yourself that isn't even real. And that's where the danger begins. The more approval you get for being someone you're not, the harder it becomes to show up as who you truly are. You might even begin to fear that your real self won't be accepted at all. That's why so many people keep performing, stuck in roles they never consciously chose, living a life that feels increasingly hollow. Jung called this a form of spiritual emptiness, a deep inner loneliness that persists even when you're surrounded by people. Why? Because those connections aren't rooted in truth. They're built on illusion. You're not being loved for who you are. You're being liked for who you pretend to be. Have you ever walked away from a gathering feeling drained, even though everyone seemed to enjoy your company? That's a sign your soul is exhausted from playing a part. And it's not just emotional exhaustion, it's a spiritual wound. Because when the soul is not seen, it suffers. In Jungian terms, when we become overly identified with the persona, we lose touch with the self, our deeper, authentic identity. The result is a kind of spiritual disconnection, a silent crisis of meaning. As Jung warned, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But how many people actually give themselves that permission? Instead, they chase applause, conform to expectations, and abandon the one person who truly matters, their inner self. And it doesn't stop there. When you surround yourself with people who only love the mask, what happens the moment you take it off? Will they stay or will they leave? That's the terrifying truth many avoid. So ask yourself, are your connections feeding your soul or feeding your image? Are you building relationships based on your truth or maintaining ones that require you to hide? The difference is everything. Spiritual wisdom invites you to walk away from relationships that reward your silence and step into spaces where your truth is welcomed, even if that means walking alone for a while. Because solitude with truth is better than a company built on lies. Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom reminds us that the most dangerous form of abandonment is self-abandonment. So next time you feel the urge to perform, to edit yourself, to play the part, pause, breathe, and ask, who am I trying to be right now? And why? That question alone can open the door to a more authentic, soul-nourishing life. 7. Archetypal traps in group dynamics. Have you ever stepped into a room and, without saying a word, found yourself being labeled, boxed in, or expected to play a role that you never signed up for? Carl Jung's profound understanding of the psyche revealed that in every group, whether it's your circle of friends, your team at work, or even your family, archetypal roles silently and unconsciously begin to emerge. Someone becomes the leader, someone the clown, someone the fixer, and someone often unfairly the scapegoat. These roles are not the result of conscious choice or mutual agreement. Rather, they arise from what Jung called the collective unconscious, the inherited patterns of human experience. And the dark truth? Most friendships are not rooted in genuine emotional connection or shared values, but are unconsciously governed by these psychological blueprints. As painful as it may be to accept, sometimes you weren't loved for who you are. You were merely needed for the role you unconsciously agreed to play. This is where the spiritual journey begins, not in blaming others, but in recognizing the patterns that have silently shaped your relationships. If you've ever felt like you were giving too much, always fixing others' messes, or being treated as the emotional punching bag, chances are you've been cast in a role that served others' comfort but betrayed your own truth. This isn't just about personality. This is about archetypes, deeply embedded patterns that play out in every social structure unless you wake up to them. And this spiritual awakening isn't some mystical detachment from the world. It is the gritty, sobering process of seeing through the illusion of connection and reclaiming your authentic self. Jung warned us not to confuse belonging with being seen. One can be surrounded by people and still remain profoundly unseen. That's because the group often doesn't see you. They see the version of you that best suits their needs. The fixer, so they can avoid fixing themselves. The scapegoat, so they don't have to face their own shame. The leader, so they can avoid responsibility. The moment you try to step out of that role, the group may resist, turn on you, or accuse you of changing. But is it really a change, or simply a return to who you were before the mask? This is why spiritual strength isn't measured by how many people love you. It's measured by how deeply you love yourself, enough to leave places where your soul is not honored. In modern life, this looks like walking away from the friend who only calls when they need something. It looks like saying no without guilt. It looks like no longer playing the role of savior, peacemaker, or emotional dumping ground. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that privilege demands that you see where you've been unconsciously manipulated into a role and choose instead to be a whole person. So let me ask you this. In the groups you are in, do you feel seen or simply used? Are your relationships built on mutual respect? Or are they constrained by silent roles that make you feel small? These are not easy questions to answer, but they are essential. Because the moment you begin to answer them with brutal honesty, you will begin a true spiritual awakening. Not one that seeks to escape reality, but one that empowers you to transform it. And as you peel back the layers, you may realize that some of the people you once called friends were not really friends. They were just characters in a play you never auditioned for. True connection can only begin when the play is over. Comment below. I choose the right friend. 8. True friendship requires conscious inner work. When Carl Jung said that true friendship requires intense psychological effort, he wasn't exaggerating. He meant that unless you've done the hard inner work of shadow integration, pulling back your projections, and becoming aware of the deep archetypal patterns that drive your behavior, then what you call friendship may be nothing more than a house of mirrors. You're seeing people not as they truly are, but through the lens of your unmet needs, childhood wounds, and unconscious expectations. And the same is happening in reverse. Think about that for a second. If you've never shown your real self to anyone, and no one has truly shown theirs to you, have you ever actually had a friend? That question might be uncomfortable, but it's meant to wake you up. It's meant to confront you with a spiritual truth that most people avoid their entire lives. You see, spirituality isn't just about transcending this world. It's about becoming so present and real within it that your connections stop being performative and start becoming transformational. True friendship isn't about surface-level bonding or convenience. It's about two people who have walked through their own shadows, faced their pain, and can sit together in mutual honesty, without masks, without games. Think about how many of your relationships were built on roles you played: the helper, the achiever, the funny one, the responsible one, and in return, they projected their own needs onto you. Maybe you were never really seen, only used, and you probably did the same to others without even realizing it. We all do this until we begin to awaken. That's where spiritual growth begins, not in seeking more people to love us, but in learning how to see clearly and love consciously. In modern life, this lesson hits especially hard. You could have thousands of followers, hundreds of contacts, a buzzing phone, and still feel deeply alone. Why? Because without this inner work, your relationships are just echoes. I once knew a man who was the life of every party, always surrounded, always laughing. But one day, he broke down and admitted he didn't know if anyone truly knew him or if he even knew himself. His whole social life was a mask, and behind it, he was starving for depth. That's the reality for many. So I want to ask you, how many people in your life truly see you? And do you even let them? When was the last time you sat with someone and let yourself be fully human, flawed, messy, and honest without performing, pleasing, or hiding? That is where real friendship begins. That is where connection becomes sacred. And this is why spiritual growth isn't optional. If you want real relationships, it's essential. The lesson is simple, but not easy. You have to do your inner work. You have to know your own darkness if you want to meet someone else's light. True friendship isn't given. It's created through the fire of self-awareness. So next time you call someone your friend, ask yourself, not, do they like me, but do they see me? And even more importantly, am I showing up as my true self? Because only in that space, where nothing is hidden, can friendship become the healing force it was always meant to be. What part of this message resonates with you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how this has shaped your journey. As we've explored today, Carl Jung's profound insight into human connection reveals a haunting truth that many of the relationships we believe to be genuine are often projections of unresolved psychological material. If those around you are only seeing a version of you shaped by their own inner wounds, then real connection becomes nearly impossible. At Spiritual Wisdom, we invite you to reflect deeply. Are your friendships rooted in truth or illusion? Begin by seeing yourself clearly. Only then can others truly see you. If this message resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever felt unseen or misunderstood by those closest to you? Let's start a conversation that matters if your story might be the light someone else needs today. Why the most spiritually awake are always misunderstood. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung. Have you ever felt like the more spiritually awake you become, the less others seem to understand you? You're not alone, and you're not broken. In today's video on spiritual wisdom, we'll explore why the most spiritually awakened souls are often misjudged, isolated, or labeled as too intense, and how this misunderstanding is actually a sign that you're evolving beyond collective illusions. If this resonates with your journey, drop a comment below. Have you experienced this kind of spiritual loneliness? Let's start the conversation and awaken together. 1. Your light activates the shadow in others. Spiritually strong men carry a quiet, grounded power that doesn't need to announce itself to be felt. It radiates from the soul, steady and unmoving, and that's precisely why it unsettles people. Carl Jung called this phenomenon the activation of the shadow, the hidden, rejected aspects of the self. When you walk into a room with authentic presence, you unintentionally become a mirror. Without uttering a word, your calm confidence stirs the unconscious in others. Suddenly, they feel exposed, not because you judged them, but because your light revealed what they've spent years trying to bury. And in that moment, their reaction isn't about you at all. It's about the parts of themselves they're not ready to face. That's why your silence can feel louder than noise, your honesty sharper than criticism, and your boundaries more threatening than confrontation. You don't have to speak truth to trigger resistance. Your soul does it for you. And because people aren't often taught how to sit with their own discomfort, they project it outward. You'll be labeled as distant, cold, or too intense. Not because you are, but because your authenticity breaks the illusion they're still clinging to. It's not that you are misunderstood by accident. It's that your very existence challenges their unspoken denial. Jung once said that people will go to great lengths to avoid facing their own souls. That includes rejecting those who remind them of what they've abandoned inside themselves. The rejection you experience isn't personal, it's spiritual. It's not your flaws that repel people, it's your healed parts. It's your refusal to play small, to dilute your essence for acceptance. The more aligned you become with your soul, the more incompatible you'll be with shallow connections and surface-level interactions. You'll begin to notice how your growth threatens those still committed to stagnation. You'll feel the emotional distance grow, not because you're pushing people away, but because they don't know how to meet you at the depth you now inhabit. This is the cost of spiritual awakening. It doesn't just open your eyes to truth, it exposes who's unable to walk beside it. And so, you begin to understand. The discomfort you cause is not a sign you've done something wrong. It's confirmation that your light is working. It's activating, revealing, shaking loose the unhealed within others. And while it can be painful to be the one who always gets misunderstood, misjudged, or misread, it's also proof that your soul is no longer dimmed by the fear of being different. You weren't made to fit in. You were made to reflect what others aren't yet ready to see. Not to shame them, but to remind them. Not to control them, but to liberate them. This is what the spiritually awake do, often in silence, often alone. And it is precisely in that sacred solitude that your soul grows stronger. Are you ready to embrace the light within you? even if it makes others uncomfortable? If so, comment below. I choose to shine, to affirm your commitment to walking in your truth, no matter who it unsettles. 2. You don't fit the roles others expect you to play. You've likely felt it since childhood, the subtle yet constant pressure to become what others find acceptable. You were expected to smile when it hurt, agree when your soul screamed no, and conform even when your spirit longed to break free. Carl Jung called this persona a social mask we wear to survive. But when you begin to awaken spiritually, that mask starts to suffocate you. You can no longer pretend. You stop performing, stop people-pleasing, stop deluding yourself to maintain peace that only serves others' comfort. And when you do, the world around you shifts. Not because you've become difficult, but because you've finally become honest. The very people who once praised your kindness now call you cold. They say you've changed, but in truth, you've simply returned to who you were before the world told you who to be. There's a man who spent decades as the nice guy in every room. He said yes when he meant no, worked late just to be liked, and silenced his ideas to avoid conflict. But one day, after studying Carl Jung's insights on individuation, the process of becoming your true self, he stopped. He stopped volunteering his time out of guilt. He started speaking his truth even when his voice shook. The shift was quiet but powerful. People recoiled, claiming he'd become arrogant or selfish. But the truth was, he had finally aligned with his soul. And in doing so, he outgrew every room that required his silence to feel secure. This is what happens when you awaken. You no longer fit roles that ask you to play small. You stop laughing at shallow jokes. Stop tolerating manipulative energy. Stop engaging in connections that ask for your performance rather than your presence. This isn't arrogance, it's alignment. And rejection at this point is not failure. It's purification. Your authenticity becomes too heavy for spaces built on illusion. Your truth exposes the falseness in others. They don't leave because you're wrong. They leave because you're real. And realness threatens every mask that still needs validation to survive. Carl Jung warned that becoming your true self is the privilege of a lifetime, but it often costs you the people who only loved the mask you wore. When you no longer bend yourself to be palatable, those who thrived on your self-abandonment will claim you've lost your way. But what you've really done is return home to the self that no longer needs permission to exist. If you feel alone after choosing the truth, remember this: your soul is not breaking, it is shedding. You are not difficult, you are deeply alive. You're not cold, you're clear. The world may mislabel your transformation, but your evolution is not theirs to define. Let them misunderstand. Let them leave. Let their discomfort expose the limits of who they were allowed to see you as. Your path is no longer about being accepted, it is about being aligned. Because as Carl Jung revealed, when you drop the persona, you don't just lose the role, you reclaim the soul. Have you ever stopped pretending just to be accepted? If so, share your story in the comments to inspire others on the same path. If not, comment, "I will live in truth," to declare your commitment to dropping the mask and embracing your authentic self. 3. You see what others don't want to see. You see what others deny, not because you're trying to dig too deep, but because your soul was designed to feel the undercurrents of life. Carl Jung called it the function of intuition, a spiritual radar that picks up on what the world tries to hide. You notice the fear behind someone's confidence, the sorrow behind their laughter, the tension in a room before a word is spoken. You are not imagining things. You are not being dramatic. You are spiritually awake, and that makes people uncomfortable. Because when you walk into a space with that kind of clarity, you become a mirror not of what people want to be, but of who they truly are. And most aren't ready to see that. So they call you too much, too sensitive, or overly intense, when in truth, you are simply refusing to play the game of pretending. You don't wear the mask, and that alone exposes everyone who still does. You've likely felt it, the slow distancing when you start speaking truth, the subtle tension when your silence becomes louder than small talk. It's not that you're cold, it's that you're present. And presence, when it's spiritually grounded, reveals everything. People will say you overanalyze, but what they mean is you see through them. You hear what isn't said, feel what's hidden, and sense what's buried. And because of that, you've probably been blamed for making things awkward when all you did was exist in truth. But clarity is not cruelty. Clarity is a spiritual gift. It shines a light in the places others are still trying to keep dark. And when the light hits something people aren't ready to deal with, they run, or worse, they project. They'll say you made them feel judged, even if you said nothing at all. Because your energy speaks, your presence confronts, and your soul doesn't tolerate the lie. You're not here to make people comfortable. You're here to wake them up, even if your truth shakes them. And while that might isolate you at times, it also protects your soul from drowning in inauthenticity. The spiritually awake don't fit into shallow waters. They weren't made to sit quietly while the world celebrates fake smiles and unspoken pain. You're not misunderstood because you're flawed. You're misunderstood because you're clear. And in a society that profits off confusion, distraction, and noise, clarity is threatening. That's why people push you away. It's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because there's something undeniably right with your spirit. And it exposes what others aren't ready to face within themselves. You feel like an outsider, not because you're lost, but because you found something real in a world built on illusion. You've found that truth cannot be silenced, and that the soul, once awakened, refuses to go back to sleep. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And yet, here you are, living in yours, fully awake, fully aware, and yes, often alone. But that solitude isn't punishment. It's preparation. It's protection. It's the sacred space where your intuition sharpens, your energy cleanses, and your vision becomes undeniable. So if they walk away, let them. Your spiritual truth was never meant for everyone. It was meant for those with eyes to see, hearts to feel, and souls ready to rise. If this message resonates with your inner knowing, don't hesitate to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments, especially if you've ever been told you see too much. Let's keep exploring this deeper truth together. 4. You love deeply, while others only know. Surface love. You don't love like the world loves you. Love with your whole being, with presence, essence, and soul. While others are busy loving from convenience, from comfort, or from loneliness, you love from depth. You offer a kind of love that doesn't just skim the surface, but dives straight into the marrow of connection. Your love does not flatter the ego. It speaks to the soul. It asks for honesty, emotional presence, and the courage to face one's own shadow. That's why people are drawn to you at first. They feel something ancient and rare in your energy, something that awakens their longing for realness. But the very moment they realize it requires them to show up fully, they flinch. You see, it's easy to love when love doesn't demand transformation, but your love does. And Carl Jung was right when he said that the deepest connection begins within, not with another. People want intimacy without the mirror, affection without vulnerability, and comfort without truth. But your soul doesn't allow that. You don't chase approval. You don't beg to be seen. You simply love with such honesty that it forces others to confront what they've buried. Most people don't know what to do with that kind of intensity. They misread your emotional availability as neediness, your honesty as pressure, your vulnerability as weakness. But what they're really reacting to is the confrontation of their own emotional shallowness. You've likely heard it more than once. You're too much. You care too deeply. You feel things too strongly. But what they're truly saying is, I can't meet you at the depth where your soul lives. Because your love isn't performative. It's not dressed in pretense or curated for comfort. It's real. You speak directly to the heart, not just through words, but through your silence, your energy, your steady presence. And in a world that's addicted to distraction and emotionally allergic to truth, that's a revolutionary act. You've stopped romanticizing surface-level bonds. You're no longer satisfied with being admired. You want to be understood. You no longer crave attention. You crave resonance. You don't just want someone to stay. You want someone who sees you and chooses to stand in the fire of truth with you. And that's what most people cannot do. They love the idea of depth, but not the responsibility that comes with it. They long for spiritual intimacy, but flee when the soul starts to speak. And still, you keep loving. Not because it's easy, but because it's who you are. You carry the weight of awakened love in a world that celebrates detachment and calls it independence. But you know better. You know that love without depth is just performance. You know that emotional safety is earned through truth, not illusion. And you've learned to let go, not out of bitterness, but out of respect for your own soul's integrity. Because when people can't meet you in truth, no amount of pretending will build a connection worth keeping. So even when it hurts, you walk away with grace, trusting that the one who is meant for your kind of love will not be frightened by its fire, but healed by it. If you resonate with this, speak it into existence. I love with soul, not surface. And if this message touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your truth in the comments. Your depth is needed here. 5. You don't seek approval, and that unsettles people. Most people are wired to seek approval. It's the glue that holds society together, unspoken rules shaped by likes, compliments, applause, and silent nods of acceptance. But when you detach from that system, when you stop needing validation to feel worthy, everything around you begins to shift. This isn't rebellion. It's what Carl Jung called individuation, the sacred journey of becoming your true self, untouched by the noise of the world. But here's the truth that nobody tells you. Stepping into your authenticity won't always earn you admiration. In fact, it may do the opposite. Your calm confidence, your refusal to people please, your silent strength, it unsettles those who still build their worth on what others think of them. To the spiritually asleep, your sovereignty feels like distance. Your grounded presence, which no longer begs to be seen, is mistaken for arrogance. And so, the more spiritually aligned you become, the more misunderstood you often are. You've likely seen this play out in real life. A man who used to be the entertainer, the go-to guy, the one everyone expected to show up and perform, begins to withdraw. Not because he's bitter, not because he's angry, but because he's finally done performing. He reads Jung, begins therapy, journals his pain, faces his shadows, and makes a quiet decision to stop chasing applause. The loud laughter becomes quieter. The constant texting fades. The need to be invited everywhere disappears. And as he grows into this new version of himself, people pull away. They say things like, "You've changed," or "You're not fun anymore." But what they really mean is, you no longer serve our need to be needed. This is the cost of self-ownership. And it is a cost that few are willing to pay. Because when you stop dancing for approval, you no longer belong to them, you belong to your soul. And that threatens the system. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he never said it would feel comfortable. In fact, it's the discomfort that tells you you're on the right path. The spiritual path isn't loud. It doesn't scream for attention. It whispers, detaches, and deepens. And that depth often scares those who only know how to live on the surface. So if people mislabel your independence as coldness, let them. If they confuse your clarity with ego, let them. They don't see what you had to overcome to get here. The nights of doubt, the hours of silence, the moments where you questioned your sanity for choosing the path of truth over belonging. What you've gained is beyond their understanding. You've reclaimed your energy. You've retrieved your soul. And that, in this world of noise and imitation, is the rarest form of power. Remember, not needing approval isn't rejection, it's resurrection. The resurrection of your soul's original rhythm, unchained from societal noise, unshaken by rejection, and unbothered by misunderstanding. It's the kind of power that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. And it is precisely because it is so rare that it is so feared. Let them misunderstand. Let them project. While they're busy trying to decode your silence, you'll be too busy becoming. If you're walking this path of inner truth and no longer seek approval to feel worthy, comment below. I choose alignment over approval. And if this message speaks to your soul, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone else who's breaking free from the need to be understood. 6. Your energy heals, but not everyone wants to be healed. Your spiritual presence carries a vibration so pure, so grounded, that it doesn't have to speak to be heard. It doesn't need convincing to be felt. You walk into a room and something shifts, not because you impose, but because your energy touches invisible places in others that even they forgot existed. You are a living mirror, a catalyst. And while that may sound beautiful, the reality is far more complicated. Because healing, real healing, is not a soft glow. It's a wildfire. It burns through illusions, dredges up suppressed pain, and cracks open the protective shells people have built around their trauma. And this is where the misunderstanding begins. Most people are not running from you. They're running from what they feel when they're around you. Your spiritual energy doesn't just comfort, it confronts. It brings up memories, emotions, regrets, longings, and buried grief. The ones who are initially drawn to you often retreat without warning, not because you hurt them, but because they can no longer avoid the parts of themselves that your presence activates. Carl Jung's archetype of the wounded healer explains this dynamic with piercing truth. He believed that those who have been through the darkest nights of the soul become the most potent vessels for healing, not because they are flawless, but because they've earned their wisdom through pain. Your soul became medicine not by bypassing your suffering, but by walking through it, bleeding through it, and choosing to alchemize it. But that same medicine, when offered to those who are not ready, becomes too strong. They want healing to feel good. They want light without heat. They want clarity without discomfort. And when your spiritual vibration begins to awaken their shame, their self-abandonment, their avoidance, they either lash out or disappear. Not everyone who seeks your light is ready to be illuminated. Some just want your warmth, not your fire. They want to be seen, but not truly known. They crave your empathy, but not your mirror. And still, you remain misunderstood. Because in a world that romanticizes healing, few are prepared for what it actually demands. They say they want peace, but not the confrontation with inner chaos that peace requires. They say they want truth, but not the death of their illusions. And so your spiritual presence becomes a paradox, adored from a distance, but rejected up close. You represent the version of themselves they're afraid to become, the one who tells the truth, feels deeply, holds boundaries, and refuses to abandon the soul for temporary approval. You don't play small. You don't dilute your essence just to make others comfortable. And that scares them. But there is nothing wrong with you. Your energy is not too much. Your silence is not cold. Your boundaries are not unkind. You are simply living at a frequency that exposes everything that is not real. That is a spiritual gift, but it comes with a spiritual cost. Loneliness, rejection, projection, misunderstanding. Yet you are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to be true to your calling. You are the wounded healer, the living soul that reminds others of their potential, whether they love you for it or resent you for it. Keep your light strong. Hold your mirror steady, and never forget, the right souls will not only stay, they will rise with you. If your presence brings healing, but not everyone embraces it, that's not your burden to carry. Stay rooted in your light. For more insights on spiritual energy and inner growth, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss what's coming next. 7. You chose truth, and truth always comes with a cost. You stopped bending, stopped twisting your truth just to be palatable. You no longer diluted your essence to make others comfortable. And in that moment, something sacred happened. Your soul took over. Choosing the truth was never about rebellion. It was a return to the core of who you are beneath the conditioning, the expectations, the subtle contracts of compliance that society teaches us to sign with a smile. Carl Jung once said, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries." But most people can't bear that kind of integration because it demands the death of illusion. It requires walking away from personas and identities that once offered safety. You, however, chose to confront the falsehoods within and around you. And that choice, though deeply spiritual, came with a price most are unwilling to pay. Truth isn't loud. It doesn't come with applause or approval. In fact, it often arrives with silence, distance, and the kind of loneliness that only the spiritually awakened understand. When you chose alignment over attachment, people began to fall away. Not because you pushed them, but because your light became too bright for their shadows. Your authenticity, your spiritual clarity, disrupted the equilibrium they maintained through denial. They didn't reject you. They rejected the mirror your soul had become. They called your boundaries cold. They labeled your insight as arrogance. But what they truly feared was the reflection you held up, because once you live in truth, you make it impossible for others to hide in pretense. That is the quiet power of the awakened soul. It doesn't scream, it simply shines, and that shine exposes everything. You didn't lose people. You lost the illusion that they were truly connected to you. You lost the version of them that only loved the version of you that stayed small. You began speaking in frequencies instead of words, vibrating in presence instead of performance. And that shift disoriented those who needed you to stay predictable. But spiritual alignment doesn't come with instructions. It comes with fire. It burns away everything in your life that is no longer in resonance. And the more you let go, the more you find what cannot be taken from you. Your essence, your soul, your divine clarity. Jung's wisdom pierces through this experience when he said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important." That's the wound of the awakened man. Not absence, but misattunement. You feel unseen, not because you are invisible, but because you are now vibrating at a truth others are not yet ready to face. Stillness is mistaken for coldness, discernment for judgment, silence for arrogance. But what people don't understand is that your withdrawal is not bitterness, it's protection. You are no longer willing to explain your evolution to those committed to misunderstanding it. You are no longer handing your soul to those who only want your compliance. You have become sacred ground, and not everyone is meant to walk with you there. That is not pride. That is clarity. When the soul begins to lead, your life no longer revolves around being chosen. It becomes about being aligned. And that shift transforms rejection into redirection, misunderstanding into spiritual refinement. You are not here to be accepted by the masses. You are here to embody the truth most are still afraid to admit exists. And that calling, though isolating, is divine. Because while truth costs you comfort, illusions cost you your soul, and you, brave one, finally chose to stop paying that price. To affirm your commitment to living in truth, even when it costs you comfort or connection, comment below, "I choose truth over illusion." Let your words be a light for others on this path. And if this message speaks to your soul, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another moment of spiritual wisdom. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the unseen struggles of the spiritually awake. If this message resonated with you, know that your path, though often misunderstood, is sacred and deeply meaningful. You're not alone, and your inner truth is a gift to this world, even if not everyone can see it yet. If you found value in today's video, please give it a like, share it with someone who might need this reminder, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming insights on transformation, soul growth, and higher consciousness. Until next time, stay grounded, stay true, and stay awake.